There is a highly destructive, deeply painful psychological paradox operating at the absolute center of modern everyday life that forces the human mind to feel completely isolated, invisible, and emotionally abandoned while living inside a hyper-connected world. You walk through a busy street, you manage a crowded computer workspace with high diligence, or you sit at a family dinner table surrounded by voices. To anyone looking from the outside, you are fully integrated into the social matrix. But beneath your performative smile, your conscious awareness is trapped inside an agonizing state of absolute solitude. You feel completely unknown by the people who see you every single day. In clinical cognitive psychology, this silent containment loop is known as the loneliness paradox. It is the devastating habit of a mind that has been conditioned to believe that showing your true, unfiltered self is an absolute threat to your safety, forcing you to build thick walls of emotional self-reliance that inadvertently lock out the exact human connection you are desperately screaming to experience. This profound interpersonal freeze is driven by a psychological mechanism known as defensive alienation alignment, operating through a structure called the Hyper-Vigilant Exclusion schema. When an individual matures inside an early environment where their authentic vulnerability, unique emotional expression, or basic need for safety was met with cold indifference, ridicule, or sudden abandonment by their caregivers, the brain's predictive processing engine installs a rigid protection loop. Your subconscious learns a catastrophic rule that relying on other human beings results in absolute psychological destruction. To protect your pride from ever experiencing that raw agony again, your mind executes an automated survival shift. It completely overcorrects, convincing your conscious ego that you do not need anyone, that you are perfectly fine alone, and that high self-reliance is your ultimate shield. Your brain treats the vulnerability required for true intimacy as a life-threatening hazard, effectively blinding you to the reality that your defense shield has become a solitary confinement cell. To understand why this loneliness paradox holds such an ironclad, unyielding grip over your daily awareness, we must look at the neurobiology of social exclusion and the brain's pain pathways. When modern neuroscientists place individuals experiencing chronic, deep-seated loneliness inside functional brain scanners and expose them to neutral social scenarios, they witness an extraordinary neural shortcut. The moment a neutral facial expression or a quiet room is perceived, activity instantly plummets inside the reward centers of the ventral striatum. Simultaneously, a rapid, hyper-intense wave of activity lights up the anterior cingulate cortex, the exact neural gateway responsible for processing raw, intense physical pain, like a deep bodily wound or a physical injury. In a very literal sense, your biology does not distinguish between a broken heart and a broken bone. The isolation physically hurts. This neural alarm floods your central nervous system with chronic cortisol, taking your logical prefrontal cortex completely offline, forcing your entire nervous system to remain on a permanent defensive autopilot, where neutral signals are automatically categorized as absolute rejection. When this intense neurochemical fear alarm fires during a social interaction, the subconscious mind deploys an automated defensive maneuver known as proactive rejection fabulation. This is a highly sophisticated psychological shield where the brain actively uses its intellect to invent complex, comforting justifications for why it must remain emotionally detached from the room. The human mind cannot tolerate the internal instability of recognizing that it is freezing out connection out of pure primitive fear. To protect your pride from the terrifying vulnerability of reaching out and being rejected, your brain performs a catastrophic distortion of perception. It begins telling a narrative of superior discernment. It convinces your conscious ego that the people around you are too superficial to understand you, that they don't truly care, or that you are simply too different to ever fit in. Notice how your mind weaponizes your own intelligence as an emotional shield to keep you completely blind to your own defensive withdrawal. leaving your defenses totally raised while you voluntarily push people away simply to control the timeline of your own isolation. The primary weapon the isolated ego uses to reinforce this mental prison is a process called threat-magnification tracking. When your predictive processing engine operates under a hyper-vigilant exclusion schema, it does not allow you to evaluate your social interactions with balanced logical data points. Instead, it actively forces your intellect to treat every minor conversational pause, every unreturned message, and every neutral glance inside your computer workspace as a definitive, life-threatening indicator of absolute disapproval and impending abandonment. The mind is an expert at inventing highly logical, comforting justifications for its own narrow perspective. Consider a scenario where a colleague forgets to include you in a casual greeting or a text response, takes hours to arrive on your screen. The clash between your private need for absolute validation and the reality of a busy universe creates severe cognitive dissonance inside your brain. To resolve this internal agony, your mind convinces you that their distraction is an act of deliberate cruelty, choosing the safety of an immediate retreat today over the risk of open vulnerability tomorrow. Alongside threat magnification tracking, the lonely mind utilizes a secondary, highly passive filter known as performative availability caching. Once a person has fully committed to total emotional invisibility, their subconscious transforms their daily interactions into a series of flawless, hollow transactions. You find yourself acting as the perfect listener, the continuous problem solver, and the hyper-reliable worker inside your workspace, entirely blind to the reality that your brain is executing a defensive maneuver. By filling your social connections entirely with the problems, the thoughts, and the feelings of others, you successfully ensure that nobody ever has the time or space to look past your performance and discover your own internal void. Your selective attention filter ensures that your brain highlights your surface utility while completely deleting your right to be seen, comforted, and protected. This filter alters your perception because it makes your deep isolation look like an act of superior independence and maturity, completely shielding your ego from the terrifying reality that your refusal to show your own needs is keeping you completely invisible. These abstract biological filters manifest daily in devastating real-world loops, the most common of which is the trap of the connected void citadel. This is the precise reason why highly prominent, charismatic and popular individuals can stand at the absolute center of a large social circle or manage a high-visibility project inside their computer workspace, yet remain entirely frozen in a loop of permanent, unassisted emotional starvation. Because you have trained your environment to expect absolute strength and zero emotional demands from your side, you construct an absolute optical illusion across your entire timeline. The crowd looks at your performative confidence and assumes you are entirely secure. When your energy levels hit a baseline of total exhaustion, you find yourself completely trapped by your own reputation. You cannot lower your guard or admit your loneliness, because your brain registers breaking the mask as an immediate survival threat to your position in the pack, forcing you to carry a mountain of pressure alone, simply to preserve the crowd's comfortable delusion of your completeness. We see this exact same self-sabotage playing out through the pattern of the bitter solitude loop. When an ordinary, empathetic human being spends years hiding their true self behind a mask of performative availability while denying their own feelings, their central nervous system eventually enters a state of absolute structural collapse. Because you cannot maintain the flawless mirror persona any longer without receiving a single drop of genuine emotional nutrition, a deep, bitter wave of toxic resentment begins to simmer beneath your conscious awareness. You look at the people around you, people who are happily taking your energy, your time, and your support without ever asking how you are truly doing, and your mind performs an immediate dark rewrite of history. You brand them as uniquely cold, selfish, and predatory, entirely blind to the reality that your own hyper-independent masking is the exact mechanism that trained them to treat you as an unbreakable resource rather than a vulnerable human being, locking the loop perfectly. When this collective hyper-independent masking and defensive alienation scales up across an entire demographic, it produces the highly destructive phenomenon of social atomization and collective loneliness. A culture slides into a profound crisis of decay when its primary citizens stop interacting through genuine vulnerability, shared truth, and mutual protection, choosing instead to navigate existence solely through the filtered lens of performative competence, curated digital lives, and low-risk compliance. Independent emotional honesty is treated as an embarrassing social liability. Mass masking turns a population into a synchronized herd of isolated, unthinking echoes who will gladly trade true human intimacy and deep psychological safety simply to protect the collective ego from the risk of being perceived as weak. A civilization does not lose its sanity because it is overrun by external monsters. It slides into a cold, clinical madness because ordinary citizens choose compliance with a comfortable, shared illusion of self-reliance over the raw discomfort of reaching out across the void. The true danger of the loneliness paradox is that it constructs a perfectly closed, self-fulfilling cognitive loop that entirely blinds you to your own loss of personal sovereignty. The cycle begins the moment your body experiences an automated wave of internal isolation or emotional abandonment inside your workspace. This high-stress environment creates immediate subconscious pressure to protect your independent persona, forcing your brain to reduce activity in its logical and self-reflective networks. Because your internal boundaries are lowered by the fear of looking weak, you choose compliance with the mask, adopting a performative availability loop and burying your pain deeper beneath a reassuring smile. To clear the immediate wave of internal guilt, your mind instantly deploys proactive rejection validation, rewriting history to convince your conscious ego that staying invisible was your only realistic choice. This failure to stand for your own human need for connection is then used by your predictive engine as a new baseline, permanently locking you in a loop of trauma dependency. Dismantling this matrix of emotional starvation requires a rare, aggressive practice known as selective vulnerability. You cannot think your way out of a loneliness paradox. Your brain's high-level comfort filters will simply hijack your thoughts to validate your isolation, demanding hard, physical acts of voluntary social friction and unmasked disclosure to break the circuit. This reprogramming begins by learning an extraordinary, liberating truth uncovered in clinical psychology. Your need for human connection is a fundamental biological requirement, not a sign of dependency or weakness. The next time a wave of heavy isolation or low-grade panic hits your system inside your computer workspace, do not look to your performance for validation. Recognize that your rising heart rate is your amygdala firing an early rejection alarm under the fear of standing out. Force your physical body to execute an absolute stop. Drop the mask. Choose one safe individual or environment, and share one small piece of your raw, unfiltered reality, providing an immediate data point that proves your voice is safe. Tearing away your armor of strength and choosing to stand in your raw, unfiltered human truth is an act of supreme heroism, because it forces you to face the raw neural pain of standing completely exposed outside your fortress of certainty. Your brain will fight this process at every single turn, desperately screaming at you to put the mask back on, hide your pain, and accept the comfortable shared illusions of your independence simply to keep your ego safe in the pack. But now that you know the anatomy of the trap, now that you understand how your subconscious mind uses defensive alienation, the exclusion schema, and performative availability to turn you into an unthinking echo, the performance has lost its lock over your consciousness. You can choose to step out of the illusion and view your reality with absolute, unyielding clarity. This navigation of your subconscious architecture is a lifelong education, and your brain utilizes dozens of other invisible neural mechanisms every single day to dictate your choices and trap you on autopilot without your consent. If you are ready to shatter the rest of these hidden mental loops, discover how your mind fakes reality, and unlock the true mechanisms of your subconscious, click on the playlist appearing on your screen right now. We have built an entire archive of long-form psychological deep dives designed explicitly to help you look past the self-delusions of your ego. Click through, explore the library, and take absolute control of your psychology.